Okay. Thank you, Lindsay. Can I get a green check? Can everybody hear me? Excellent. I'm seeing most everybody. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so my name is Karen Schneider. I'm sitting here actually in Vermont. And for those somewhat dry after all the nasty flooding that we had. But I feel like I got the after lunch session because after Labor Day we have people have to go back to their offices and go back to work and have so many things that they have to do. But we'll have a good time here and probably have a little chance to have a little more interaction with a smaller group. So today I'm going to talk about ethics, and this is really just an introduction to some general concepts. There's so much written about ethics. There are so many websites, so many resources. So we're not going to be able to get into all of that today, but have an opportunity at the end of the session to put forward some ideas of things that you would like to see in follow-up sessions that we haven't covered today. So basically what I'm going to cover today is the relevance of ethics in today's nonprofits and community organizations, some key definitions, and then some competencies, components, and commonalities of ethical leadership. And it seems like I used a lot of C's in a lot of slides today. So let's start with the survey says, and I'm going to be talking about a survey that the Ethics Resource Center does, and they did a survey in 2007. It was fourth in a longitudinal study of U.S. workplaces, and it's entitled National Nonprofit Ethics Survey, an Inside View of Nonprofit Sector Ethics. And I have this as a resource at the end of the presentation so you can see it. So let's just take a look at what some of those key findings are. And the first one is that nonprofit organizations have the strongest ethics standing over any other sector, and that includes the for-profit and governmental sectors. So that's actually pretty good. The second one is that integrity in the nonprofit sector is eroding, which is unfortunate. And this is the first time since the Ethics Resource Center, ERC, began measuring it in 2000. So that's a little bit disturbing. And then the third point is that governance makes a substantial difference. And governance refers to governance within a nonprofit. Nonprofit boards of directors have more influence on employees' perceptions of the workplace than directors in other sectors. But the employees, and that might be paid or non-paid employees, are least positive about their board's ethics, which is, once again, a little disturbing, but things are changing there. Whoops, went too far, sorry, we'll go back. Make sure I click on the right one here. Okay, another finding was that size makes a difference in the organization when it comes to misconduct. Most nonprofit organizations are mid-sized, and mid-sized organizations are experiencing the most misconduct. 7% more employees worked in mid-sized organizations than the year before, and then larger organizations, misconduct is observed at 23% more often, and then in the smaller ones. So again, it depends on the size. The middle ground is where people don't have the oversight. If it's a small group, kind of people are just looking over each other's shoulders. In larger groups, there may be more established ethical codes that are shared. Well-implemented programs have made the difference, and this is really good. organizations that have kept ethics risks at bay have implemented an effective program. And then that goes along with a near perfect result can be achieved. Organizations that establish a well-implemented program and focus on building a strong ethical culture experience the greatest reduction in ethics risk. A strong ethical culture can virtually eliminate pressure to compromise ethical standards. So these are the basic findings, and there's a lot more information if you want to go and take a look at it in that survey. Now, before I move on to the next slide, before we go to a whiteboard, Lindsay, I also want to just make a couple of other points from the report also. The good news is that when compared with the for-profit businesses and government institutions, these nonprofit organizations still exhibit stronger ethical cultures and greater alignment of employees' personal values with the mission and values of the organization. And that kind of goes along with that first one about having the strongest ethics standing over the sector. Nonprofit employees who demonstrate ethical courage and report misconduct, they have observed are less likely to experience retaliation than employees in other sectors. So perhaps that goes hand in hand. If you feel like you're not going to be cast as a whistleblower, that you might step forward. The nonprofit sector is the best possible example of the difference of a well-implemented ethics program and strong culture can make. So where present levels of misconduct drop to nearly zero, and when violations occur, 100% of employees report the situation to management. So they can get really almost to that level. And again, the bad news that goes along with these 6 concepts that have come forward is that conduct that violates the law or an organizational standards is on the rise. That financial fraud is higher in nonprofit organizations than it is in business or government. And boards, while they're very important shaping the perceptions of employees in regards to ethics, are actually not taking advantage of their influence to set clear ethical standards. So anyway, things are good and bad, but still mostly good. But we're starting to see a decline in the ethical culture in nonprofits. So let me go to a whiteboard, Lindsay, and while you're putting that up there for folks, and I'm just looking, I see one question, was the actual size breakdown for small, medium, and large businesses in the study? It is in the study. Can I get back to you on that, Aileen? I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, because it is broken down in the sizes. Okay, so I want to talk to you about, if I can find the page, I just had it. I wanted to tell you what the types of misconduct that we're seeing in nonprofits. And this again is from 2007. And the top 4 prevalent types of misconduct, the first one at 24%, and these of course don't all add up to 100%, they're individual items, is putting own interests ahead of organization, which comes into the area of like conflict of interest, okay? And that is the most observed misconduct in nonprofits in 2007. So it's conflict of interest. And I'm not sure if people actually know sometimes what that means. The second one is lying to employees, which I think is rather interesting. Abusive behavior is the third one, and misreporting hours worked is the fourth one. So there are a lot of other ones ranging from internet abuse, and actually that comes in at 5th, discrimination, stealing, alteration of financial records is down there. But on this whiteboard, I'd like to hear from folks out there what kinds of ethical conflicts or dilemmas or misconduct are you experiencing either in your setting, in your organization, or in your immediate community. So can we take a minute and have people write on the whiteboard what kinds of misconduct are are you reading about in the newspaper or is happening in your particular setting? Okay. Embezzlement seems to be in the news. Yes, it certainly does, in the national and local news. Another one here, let me see if I can make this bigger, is the gray areas of conflict of interest and product endorsement. Yeah, these are both areas. Okay, fine, we'll take, go ahead, whoever's typing. Okay. Okay. So we have somebody that's just moved to a new job and hasn't seen any unethical behavior yet. That's great. We also have somebody that's writing in here that there are some board members who want to increase the funds allocated towards college scholarships, and her son is a new high school graduate. I think that might be right up there with one of those gray areas of conflict. Yeah, it's very difficult, and when you get into the middle of things, trying to fix things as you go along is very, very difficult. But as we go along, we're going to talk a little bit later about how you can try, anyway, to deal with these things up front, which is why we talk about having a code of ethics and so forth. So, yeah, there is a lot in the national news and local news, and when some people say, oh, I don't think I was doing anything wrong, and we're not going to do any case studies today, but one of the things that I'd like to do at another webinar is actually go through a decision-making process and how you can address ethical issues and what criteria you might use. So thank you. This was very helpful. Okay, so Lindsay, we can clear that and go to the next slide, can we? She's great. It's always handy to have somebody else that knows what they're doing with you. So we're just going to move on to defining ethics, values, and morals, and not spend a lot of time on this, but to just think a little bit about what the definitions of these are, because we tend to use them interchangeably, and they do have very specific definitions, but then the other thing is that they really do weave together to define how we act in our communities. And please remember that each of these terms can apply across a continuum from the individual to the larger community. And the larger community may be defined as your organization. It may be a geographical community. It could be a country. It could be a world region, or it could be the world. So, you know, as you get into encompassing a bigger space and place, things get more complicated. But when we're talking about this, we're going to be talking about values that you have as an individual, values that an organization may have, morals that you hold dear to you, and morals that a community shares, and those tend to be called mores, okay? So there is a continuum, and I'll be talking, and it'll kind of flow back and forth. So you can come into this and think about this from any level. So if you just want to think about it from a personal level, no problem. If you want to think about it from your organization, or from moving beyond that and working with clients across the region, country, and the world, these definitions will also apply. Okay, so the first one is values, and values are core beliefs or the desires or desire that guide and motivate attitudes and actions. And we have thousands of values, and our values tend to fall into a couple of categories. So when we talk about values and morals and ethics, they're not linear. They kind of live side by side and move in and out in relationship to one another. So we have non-ethical values, which relate to things like that we like or desire or deem important, and they're not really right or wrong. You know, we may desire wealth, we may desire fame, we may desire status in our community, we may desire to provide service to our community, and those are things that are neither right or wrong, but those are things that we hold dear. Then we have ethical values, and those are concerned with beliefs about what is right. And examples there are we may have an ethical value around fairness. What is fair? You may have a friend who has an ethical value around fairness. It's not the same as yours because it's based on what people think of as right or wrong. So, okay, so let's go right into a whiteboard here, and let's start thinking about, the first thing here is, what are some of your own personal values? And please know that this is anonymous, so this is non-judgmental. It's just what are the things that you value in your life? And some may be more superficial, and some may be more of your core values. So we have a few up there. Writing in that. I have to write in that, right? Is this where I write? No, I think I am. I think I have to do that, right? Okay. Oh. Sorry for the whispering, folks. I was trying to figure out how to plug something in there, but I can't multitask today. Okay, so we have honesty, we have inclusiveness, truth, blind justice, honesty again, the freedoms and personal liberties that come with being an American. These are things that people, somebody finds, you know, those are very valuable to them. Honesty, there's honesty again. I've an individual in the room who that's what I was trying to type in, is saying integrity goes along with that. Loyalty, truth, justice, the value of family. You see here, we can, honesty, commitment to mission. Okay, if you're in an organization, that's something that's important to you. So some of these are ethical. Is that somebody writing personal responsibility? You're figuring out where to put things on the page. That's great. Yeah, some are, I think most of you have put values up here that are very ethical, that there aren't a lot of superficial, and superficial is not bad. You know, if you want, you know, if it's valuable to you to have a nice car, you know, that may not be the same core value as being honest and inclusive of people. So I think most of you put ethical, excuse me, ethical values up there. Okay, So now if we clear that and come up with another whiteboard, excuse me, think about organizations which are that you're representing today or to which you belong, and what are some of the values of those organizations? So, if you belong to several, just pick one if you want. So what are some of the values of your organization? And it can be a not-for-profit business, it can be a loose group or a community group. Okay, we have 4-H. Okay, healthy living, citizenship, leadership, science. 4-H values those. Committed to client self-determination. These are things that an organization or group value. Commitment to coworkers, safe workplace. Oh, these are stated values of our group. There's actually stated values: fun, honesty and integrity, respect, service, I'm trying to figure out how I get my, can I write in there? I'm not able to write in that one. I'm having a devil of a time. Collaboration with other service providers, teamwork, leadership. These are great. So some of you have actually putting in here answers to the next question, which is, are your organizational values written down? So can you give me a check mark in the polling box up in the participant box? Some of you have answered this. Are your organizational values written down somewhere? Great. That's really a good start. Excellent. Now, are they shared with your organization? Can you write a check mark or a red X? Are they actually shared? Okay. We have some green checks there. And there may be some question about whether they are shared. Very often they're shared at they may be posted somewhere, they may be shared in an orientation, or they may be shared at different events. They may be printed somewhere on paper or at, in social media places. Oh, got a couple of others. Great. So I'm actually talking to the choir here. Yes, we have a question. Is being posted on the website the same as sharing? Yes, it is. That's one of the places. There are many ways to share what our values are. But we'll talk a little bit about when we get to actually leadership, how many people are really paying attention to that. So that's a good question, Kathy. Okay, so let's go on to our next definition, which the definition of morals. And morals are beliefs about what is right or wrong. And this is our inner compass. And, you know, if we use our morals as our inner compass, we use this to look at our values and say which of those values that we have are right or wrong. So, and this is really kind of a subjective assessment. So the question is, where did we learn our morals? You know, we have morals, we have personal morals, and we have societal customs, which are those mores. And when you go to different societies, very often there's a chance that you have different morals, different things that are right or wrong, and different punishments and different systems of reward and punishment about that. And as our world gets bigger, this really does become an issue. So on a whiteboard, Lindsay's good at this, where and or from whom did you learn what is right or wrong? Parents, society, parents, schools, churches, family, parents, organizations, teachers, older siblings, grandparents, scouts, own personal experiences, yes, co-workers, older family members, older friends. You know, we learn these things, and when we're very young, we may take them part and parcel. And as somebody has put up here, that you know, we then may change our opinion, or change our opinion of what is right or wrong, and change our moral compass a little bit based on our own experiences. Yes, school, teachers, siblings, older friends, grandparents. Most of you started off with parents. So that's very early on when we are exposed to this is right, this is wrong, this is what you know, in your home. Somebody says couldn't get a box but agree. I totally understand that. I'm having that same issue today. So we learn very early on about what is right or wrong, and then we're tested as we get older and we experience new things. We go to school, we go to churches, we belong to organizations. All of those things, we get a job in different workplaces, and it's like, okay, so, you know, does that really, you know, what I learned at home, is that really right or wrong? And we do tend to, in smaller circles and smaller communities, we kind of know what everybody is thinking. But again, it does become an issue when we get into the wider world, because people have very different upbringings. So thank you for that. So the next definition, the end of the definitions here, is ethics. And this is the foundation of like how we actually act. It's the standard of conduct that indicates how one should behave based on principles about right or wrong. Okay? So now the difference between these is that values are motivators to action. Those are the things that we hold dear. We say, are they moral? Are they right or wrong? And we can place that filter on them. And then we can also place an ethics filter and the foundation principles that inform and ground our actions. So we may think that having a gold watch, for example, we value that. That's something we would like to have. But then we think, okay, so I value that. That's not ethical. That's not an ethical value. It's just something I value. I have a moral code that says stealing is wrong. So those two things together may form the foundation for me that says, if I want that gold watch, I'm going to have to do something other than steal it. I'm going to have to earn some money and go and buy it, or I may decide that if my moral compass is lacking, it may say, well, you know, my moral compass says that any way you can get it is fine. So if I value that gold watch, I might actually go out and steal that gold watch. And then when you have, those people have ethics, they just are at a different standard of ethics and presents the foundation of principles that may not align and would not align in our society anyway. So, I want to stop now and ask if there are any questions. We can post them in the chat box at this point about the definitions and kind of about why we're actually talking about ethics these days. While you're thinking about that, if you do have some questions, I remember growing up. I can't even tell you who it belongs to, but I'm sure it's not my original thought. It says conscience gets a lot of credit that belongs to cold feet. And as a child, when you were told to do things that you shouldn't do, oh well, I won't do that. Sometimes it passed through my mind, well, I'd really like to do that, but I hadn't really developed my moral inner compass yet. So I sort of did it because I didn't want to get caught at it. And that's actually a different circle of thinking. You have three kind of circles if you think about it. And the first inner circle is it's all about me, and I don't want to get in trouble. And then we have the next circle out, and that's, well, I don't want to make my family or my friends or those people that are part of my clan embarrass them. And then ethically, at this larger circle, it's like I really should do it, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And that comes from a book called The Rock by Bill Grace. And I will put that, list that up on our website too. So I realized that after we put the people who helped us learn our morals or ethics, none of us put ourselves. An interesting transition we deal with as adults, since we have come up with our decisions or monitor our own moral compasses generally on our own. Yes, that's actually true. And we do have people in our life sometimes that are reality checkers. But I think that's a really good point, because are we now, and this is a wonderful transition, thank you, Christy, is, we put people, we think about people who were our mentors or our guides, and who are they now, and who are we mentors and guides for as people are growing up around us? And we don't have to, we can actually be the same age and be mentors and guides for each other. And that's actually what happens a lot in organizations. And in small organizations, when people know each other, you kind of know, well, so-and-so does this, or, so-and-so, you got to be careful what so-and-so says, because they may not, they stretch the truth a little bit. That's all about morals and mores and making sure that when you're getting people in your organization, if you're getting volunteers in your organization, or you belong to an organization, are all those things all consistent? Excellent point. So I guess we'll move on. If you have other questions, you can pop them in. Okay, so let's move on to ethical leadership. And just this is one definition of ethical leadership. There are many, many definitions, as there are many definitions for some of those other terms that we're using, although what I'm using here is really sort of a conglomerate of things in many places. And so ethical leadership starts with knowing your core values and having the courage to live them in all parts of your life in service for the common good. So you can take that piece out if you want. But knowing your core values and having the courage to live them in all parts of your life. So if you're ethical at home, are you ethical at work? Are you ethical in your community organizations? It's very interesting, because some people aren't, but some people are. So that's basically the definition. So let's go now to the whiteboard, please, Lindsay. And let's name names. Who do you admire as a leader? They can be a leader in an official position, or in sort of leading from behind, if you will. they can be somebody that is not alive anymore, or somebody that is. It can be somebody that's well known or not necessarily. So who are some of the people that you admire? Dean of a high school. Okay. So an individual. Past department head. Somebody writing truly taught me about ethics and honesty. Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Abraham Lincoln. Families, co-workers, high school teacher. I had a professor in college that just was, she really was my reality check, and she would just gently ask me questions and say, you know, why do you think that way? Why are you doing that? You know, tell me more. How did you come to that decision? And it's very interesting because she really sticks in my mind. A couple of politicians in there. Okay. My parents. Grandparents. So we have people that, you know, whose names we know, and other people who are just, you know, good people that don't get their 15 minutes of fame anywhere. Okay, thank you. So, there are several traits from people that traits that we admire in leaders, and then there are some traits that are for ethical leaders. So I'm going to just talk about the admired leaders. And these first four are from the book, The Leadership Challenge, which some of you may know about, by Kouzes and Posner. And they did this survey, lots of surveys going on, and there were 4 traits that came up when they were asked, you know, what traits do you admire in leaders? The first one, overwhelmingly, and you came up with it also, was they're honest. They're honest, they're honest, they're honest. The second was they're forward-looking. The third is that they're competent. And the fourth, that they're inspiring. Now, there were many, many other traits, but these were the 4 that came from their particular survey that really rose to the top. From some other sources that I've mentioned, there's a commitment to mission, and somebody mentioned that earlier. Caring deeply about people, and I put competent again because that showed up in a lot of other places, that admired leaders are competent. And of course that's even somewhat of a subjective assessment, but we all did think that way. Okay. Now, ethical leaders, this is something that's even a little bit, goes even a little bit further, and it is based on honesty and credibility. And this actually shows several particular steps, several particular activities that are credible and honest. They practice what they preach. Again, and this is probably, they practice what they preach not only in a work setting or a volunteer setting, but in a home setting, in a spiritual or church setting. They walk the talk. They act consistently with what they say. So they say one thing, and they act consistently with that. They put their money where their mouth is. They follow through on promises, and they do what they say they will do. And some of these overlap, but it's amazing how many of these things really, depending on where you look, the various, these all come out in there. So what other traits are there about ethical or admired leaders? Do we have any? Can we just put those in our chat box? We don't have to go to a whiteboard on this one. Any other things that we're missing here? Do you have any? Okay. I'm going to plug something in from my colleague here. I'm going to spell graciousness. Lead by example. Stick to their principles. Yes. And it may be that in your organization there may be other things that are pertinent to the work that you do. Okay, some other things, and these are traits that came up in a lot of other readings and that are out there. And one is that people are competent. We've heard that before, but that they are committed to releasing human potential. In other words, that they really want to look and see what people are capable of and letting people and helping people get there. So as a both admired and ethical leader, you would want to release that human potential in the best way possible. Again, this has come up in our conversation. Committed to the mission of the organization. It's important for a leader to be committed to that mission, and balancing needs of individuals and communities so that there's caring there. Okay, so if you want to change your culture in an organization, there are several things that you need to be thinking about to do. And some of this is going to be easier than others, but you'll see that these particular components really go back to some of what we've been looking at for the last half an hour. First of all, ethical leadership, the tone at the top, and the belief that the leader or leaders can be trusted to do the right thing. So it's very hard sometimes. You can admire somebody that's a leader, but chances are you've got some sort of criteria in there that they have ethics, and that those ethics align with your ethics and your morals and your values. But the tone at the top is really, really important. The next one is supervisor reinforcement. Individuals that are directly above an employee in an organization's hierarchy set a good example, encourage ethical behavior. And when we say employee, this may be a paid, it may be a supervisor that's unpaid or volunteers, but it's really about somebody saying, hey, this is how we do things here, and acting that way and making sure that the people that come into the organization and are there are actually paying attention to that. And then going back a little bit to what Christy mentioned about, we sort of get to a point where who is monitoring what we do. Well, there is a peer commitment to ethics, and if you have that broad cultural approach to changing the organizational ethics, you're going to have to make sure that it's okay that peers can support each other to do the right thing. And then there are embedded ethical values. These are values that are promoted through informal communication channels and are complementary and consistent with an organization's official values. So it's not enough just to say, this is what we value, but then we have to say, what does that look like in our organization? What does respecting people, if that is a value, what does that look like? Ethical communication, what does that look like? What does that look like related to Facebook? What does it look like related to use of cell phones? It can be all kinds of things. And some of those embedded ethical values will show up in policies about how people do business with each other, so that if a value is respect and we want to act ethically around valuing respect, what does it look like in our organization? Okay, any questions so far? It is really strange when you do webinars to have no voices in the background or see people's faces. Okay, so I put up here some of the things that nonprofits and community organizations may address. Some of these things if they're not a not-for-profit official organization. But if you're writing up an ethical code, okay, which is a good idea, there are things that your organization needs to do. You have a mission and a program, you have a governing body, conflict of interest, you deal with that, you deal with human resources, etc., etc. So when you come up with a code of ethics or a code of conduct, while they may be embedded in other places, make sure that you think about each of the pieces, the roles and responsibilities of your organization, and make sure that the ethics is embedded in each of those. And there are lots of places that you can find samples of these, and when I get to the slide on resources, there are some, there's a really good one there for Maryland that asks those questions, but you can Google it. There's a lot of information out there. So nonprofits are run by people with the same range of ethical standards as the rest of society, and we do have some bad apples, but ethical codes really help. Most of the problems that we've had when we see those things in newspapers is that there are procedural problems, okay? Common reaction is to encourage nonprofits to develop a code of ethics. And so addressing a code of ethics is good, addressing these components that are what your organization is supposed to do. But it'll make you think, your organization think through the issues, and if the entire organization is involved, the resulting code is much more likely to be relevant to you, and there'll be much more buy-in. Then you should train your employees, or even if it's just a 5-minute at a staff meeting, thinking about how you're going to implement this ethical code and explaining what language is and so forth. You have to continue to do that. It's not just one thing, one time. And better training may not have helped. There was a study, an article by Elizabeth Schmidt in GuideStar.org in November of 2004, and it said fully 99% of the chief ethical officers attending a conference board's annual business ethics conference in 2002 believed that the Enron scandal, we all remember that, would have erupted even if senior management had received extensive ethical training, although most half thought that the behavior would have been stopped more quickly. And a truly ethical organization can only exist only when its leaders embrace the ethical decision-making and recognize the importance of values other than the bottom line. So you can write an ethical code, but if you don't walk the walk and walk the talk, then it really doesn't matter. And it really has to be something that all levels have to believe in, including those at the top of the organization in hierarchical settings. Okay? So I mentioned a couple of challenges, and one we just mentioned was lack of commitment, and this is a problem. If you don't get that buy-in from everybody, there is a lack of commitment. It's problematic. And then the other one that came up several times is the diversity and a global society. Trying to find common ground with many, many different peoples that have different values, different societies with different morals and ethical codes of conduct, when we're trying to work together, even in a time when there isn't conflict, is problematic. And this becomes a place of conflict and dilemmas on a daily basis, if you can see it. One I didn't put up here, I think, is probably also our social media is the sort of the new and sort of cutting edge. It's probably going by now, but of trying to find what are values and these ethical behaviors around how we behave, because that's what ethics are. You know, how do we behave in these particular situations? Are there other challenges that people can think of? You can write them in the chat box. I don't see any there. I think that another thing that a topic that we will discuss at another point is ethical dilemmas. And when we have ethical dilemmas is when we have, and these are, oh, okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to Aileen, and I hope I'm saying that right. Misunderstood or lack of training on ethical codes and what they actually mean. Yes, it's having things written down is one thing, but what does that look like and what does that mean? And some people will be black and white. They like to have, parameters around things. Other people are more comfortable with the gray area, and I think that was something that somebody mentioned in the beginning, that there are a lot of things that, people aren't sure, is that okay to do that? And in some cases, when it's a personal dilemma, you have to go on, you struggle with it yourself, you may talk to people. When it's an organizational dilemma, there needs to be a process in place, and there are tools to use. And that's when you need to be go back and thinking about what that mission is and what are the values of the organization, because those will help guide you. It's sort of the ground rules of how you make decisions. There are a couple of examples I'll share with you. One, and this is difficult situations, which are called ethical dilemmas. There are several responses to them. And one is it ever okay to steal? Can you think of a time, stealing? I'm going to make an assumption here that stealing probably is something that we might actually agree on, that stealing is wrong. But is there ever a time when stealing might be excused? Lindsay, can we have a white screen? Whiteboard? Thank you. Is there a time that it might be okay to steal? Yeah, typical in age-old of the class question. Yeah, it is. Stealing to provide basic needs under extreme circumstances. Yep. Baby was starving. Sure. So this is very easy. I think this is, and I picked this one because it is pretty easy to think about this. And there are other ones that are pretty easy too. I will read an example from that actually came from the Josephson Institute. To keep something safe from a nefarious person, from being stolen or destroyed. Okay. And then who gets to decide that, right? Yeah, that's what makes it a dilemma. So one of the examples, and I have never forgotten this was an example when I took training a long time ago, is a Nazi knocks on the door and asks, "Do you have any Jews in here?" The person must weigh the values of honesty, responsibility, caring, fairness, citizenship. In this case, the answer, "No, we have no Jews here," puts the value of caring and justice over the values of honesty and citizenship, or following the law, which in this case, you're supposed to follow the law if you value those things. But there is certainly, we all have a priority order list, but it may not be the same one, which is where you may have an ethical dilemma yourself, but then you also have ethical dilemmas with other people and other groups, and they're much more difficult. So if you're clear on your list, your priority list of things that you value in particular situations, when you engage in discussion with others who have on an ethical dilemma, and they have their set of values, that's one of the most difficult places to get agreement, if people really differ on their basic values. In organizations, that if it's written down what those values are, again, you have something to refer to, and it tends to take more of the person out of it, and becomes more of a dilemma for the organization. So thank you for that. Okay, so I'm going to show you now some of the resources that I have used in the presentation today, and there's so much there and out there, but I do like these. Please feel free to share others. There's the Ethics Resource Center, www.ethics.org, and you can read these. I'm not going to read them to you. And that's where I actually found the National Nonprofit Ethics Survey. They have it for the nonprofit. They also have one for government. And they have one for-profit. And there's a wealth of information in there. The Maryland Association for Nonprofit Organizations has a lot of information about standards of excellence, and also how to write a code of ethics. There are lots of examples out there, but again, sometimes we just don't pay attention to doing that. Changing Minds, lots of good information there about persuasion as well, how you change minds, but they have a lot of information around doing that ethically, and some neat tools. There's the Center for Ethical Leadership and the Josephson Institute of Ethics, and they're known for their pillars of excellence. And there are it's called 6 pillars of character: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. So, and then a book that I use frequently, The Leadership Challenge. So many of you have that. Actually, there are websites. I'm looking at a question Christy has. Do you know of websites that are geared towards ethics for teens? Yes, actually, you'll find some of these things when you go to the Resource Center and Changing Minds, and particularly the Josephson Institute of Ethics. They had a program called Character Counts, and there are, I can't give you the websites right off, but they are out there, and if you Google it, you will find it, because there are, this was focused more on nonprofit organizations, because of the building capacity piece, but there are lots of resources out there for teens. So if you need help, I'd be glad to help you locate those. Okay. So I would be very happy, very appreciative if you would type in any topics for future webinar ideas. I certainly know that I would like to talk about ethical decision making, more ethical dilemmas and case studies, how you can conduct training and so forth. But I'd be very interested if there are things that we didn't cover today that you would like to hear about in the future. So if you just type those in the box, that would be great. And then I'm going to read you one little story, and then I'm going to turn it back to, do you think you recommend scenario-based training for ethics? Yes, actually, I can get that out to you. I'll put that on our website because I came across a wonderful resource that had some very current scenarios about, which is for getting people to talk about things, and they were very, very current. And one that sticks out in my mind, there were quite a number of them, and this was from 2010. They had these conferences, and this one scenario was around this ethical dilemma about promoting sports and physical activity and so forth in school, but then there was a pregnant athlete, and so we want health, and do we encourage pregnancy, and what does that say, and so forth. So there's some very, very current topics around that. That was about a teen, but they weren't all about teens. Yeah, Christy, thank you. Yeah, this was very broad brush, which is why I know people probably want more. So let me read while you're typing things in there. Would very much like to read this to you. Lindsay's put up the evaluation piece. If you decide to fight fire with treat fire and treat others the way they treat you, or the way you think they will treat you, you surrender your moral autonomy to the other person. When you sink to the level of those who are not ethical, you give up any claim you might have had to being better. Sometimes you think that this is necessary for you to win, but you must be clear on what race you are in and what it means for you to win. As Lily Tomlin said, the problem with the rat race is that even if you win, you're still a rat. So I guess the parting shot there is to take the higher ground and always choose the higher ground whenever possible. So I'm going to turn it, I thank you very much for your patience and attendance, and I'm going to turn it back to Lindsay now to follow up with our evaluation.
Well, thank you very much.